What would you think if one day your father, a man who had lived his whole life in poverty, saving every penny, suddenly inherited $1.2 million, and within just 3 weeks, kicked his own father out of the house? Greedy, ungrateful. Or is it something completely different? Today's story might change the way you see a person, and maybe even change the way you love. Money can save a family, but it can also tear one apart. I've seen friends lose their siblings over inheritance disputes. Family dinners turned into shouting matches, and when it happened in my own family, I was convinced my dad was a bad person. But I was wrong. My name is Daniel. I'm 27 and I live in a small town in Ohio. My dad, Mark, is a mechanic. His hands are always covered in grease, but he never misses dinner with me. He always told me, the greatest thing about your hands is that they can help someone else. My grandpa James used to be a farmer. My grandma passed away early, so he raised my dad on his own. Every time I visited, he'd tell stories about the fields, the war, and his love for my grandma, his voice rough but warm like a fire on a winter night. The relationship between my dad and Grandpa wasn't exactly cold, but there was always distance. Dad rarely opened up to him, and Grandpa didn't often share his feelings either. Then one day, a lawyer called. A wealthy uncle in California, someone I'd never even heard of, had left $1.2 million to my dad in his will. 3 weeks later, I came home. What I saw left me speechless. Grandpa was standing at the front door with an old suitcase in tow. Dad's voice was flat. "Drive him to the bus station. He's moving into a nursing home starting today." I choked up. "Dad, why?" He wouldn't look at me. "No arguments, just do it." Grandpa gently placed his hand on my shoulder. His eyes were distant, but there was no blame in them. The whole drive to the station I was fuming. All I could think was Dad's changed. Money has turned him into someone else. That night I called him. "Now that you've got money, Grandpa's just a burden to you. If Mom were still alive, she'd never forgive you." He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "There are things you don't know. When the time is right, I'll tell you." I hung up furious. A week later, I visited Grandpa at the nursing home. It was nothing like I'd imagined, a spacious private room, windows overlooking a garden, and the faint scent of flowers in every hallway. A nurse pulled me aside. Grandpa had mid-stage Alzheimer's. He'd wandered off multiple times and was nearly hit by a car once. Another time, he forgot to turn off the stove. The house almost caught fire. She added, his son paid nearly $300,000 up front for all his care, a private doctor, and to plant a garden full of white chrysanthemums, his wife's favorite flower. I stood frozen. When I got home, I went to find Dad. He opened a small wooden box filled with old letters. They were from my grandmother, written before she passed away. One read, "If the day comes when you grow old and lose your memory, please don't let Daniel or anyone else carry the burden. Find a place where you can be safe. And please, keep living. Don't let guilt hold you back." Dad looked at me and said, "I didn't kick your grandpa out. I did what your mom asked me to do. And I wanted you to remember him as he was not lost on a cold winter street." I remembered the look in Grandpa's eyes when he was pulling that suitcase. It wasn't sadness. It was peace. Dad still visited him every Saturday afternoon, bringing apple pie, the kind Grandma used to make. Sometimes Grandpa didn't recognize him, but he always smiled when he smelled the pie. And that's when I understood true kindness doesn't always feel warm or comfortable. Sometimes it looks like coldness, but it's rooted in a love that runs deep. I used to resent my dad, thinking he was ungrateful. But the truth is, he was willing to be misunderstood by his own son, judged by others, as long as his father was safe and cared for. Sometimes, love means staying silent and carrying the weight of judgment. The lesson I've learned: don't rush to judge when you don't know the whole story. Real kindness doesn't need to be proven. What about you? Could you accept being misunderstood as long as the ones you love are protected? Best of Prime Tales, where stories warm your heart and stay with you.